where are we? So I will speak a bit about the funding scheme, and especially about the changes that are upcoming now. And this webinar is at a very good timing because the work program has just been adopted last week. So we just published the first starting grant and the synergy grant calls last week. But first, I will introduce you to see how good you are in the ERC calls. And then I will go into the synergy grants too, then how we evaluate, and I'll give you some hints and tips. And of course, then you will hear from the grantees themselves of how they prepare the grants. But I will focus mostly on how the evaluation is going, what is needed from the perspective of the panels. So very briefly, why we can do what we can, it's because we have this fully independent scientific council that decides on the policies. They decide how the calls are run. They decide if there is something to be changed. So every year they have meetings with the panel chairs of all panels. They discuss and they look at the panel recommendations too. They hear from applicants. So they constantly try to adapt the ERC calls while keeping the whole simplicity of the ERC to the needs of the scientific community. Basically, always keeping this thing, scientific excellence is the only criterion for evaluation, and no one should decide what is to be funded. So proposals of any field can be applied to. We have a lot of money in the work program 2024 that just came out. We have about 2.2 billion to spend on the main ERC calls. How are these divided? You probably have applied, and I'm sorry that I don't see you face to face to just ask you how many of you applied to individual calls or to synergy grants before, but basically to know that in the starting and consolidated calls, you need to prove that you had a PhD because they are tied to how many years you spent after your PhD in research. Advanced grants and synergy grants do not require any formal PhD document. So any senior researcher can apply to the advanced grants and to the synergy grants. I will go into more details, but any career stage, young and old, can apply for 10 million euros normally. That's a normal grant amount for 6 years. And then under certain conditions, you can ask for 4 million more. And then there is a proof of concept call that is available only to grantees once you get the ERC grant. So where is Belgium? Look at the success rate since 2007 to 2022. You are really there at the front of the success rate if you consider these are all the individual main calls together. Now, this also gives you a good picture on where the grantees are and who are the grantees even in your country, because the red bar, it's the Belgians in Belgium. Like if you look at the red arrow, that's the Belgium. And then the blue ones, it means that you can attract, you can attract foreign nationals into your country, but it also shows that you have some movement. So there are a good number of Belgians as well who are based with their ERC grants in other countries. It's just interesting to see as a comparison. For example, look at Switzerland, which has only about less than 1/3 of their grantees are actual Swiss. The others are all foreign nationals. And you, of course, you see a very different picture. For example, in Israel, you can see that most of the grantees, they are Israeli nationals. So is it fair how many grants you get? Can you expect more? One sort of measure is this ERC grants versus on how many top publications you have in the top 1% highly cited publications. And you can see that it really highly correlates. It's a linear fit. So what you get out as an output, how good you are, that is reflected in publications, is reflected also in the number of the ERC grants that you are receiving. This is about the synergy grantees so far. That's the date in March of this year. So you can see that you have 7 synergy grantees. That's very respectable number for Belgium. And this, if you look at the success rate, then this is a bit around the average success rate where you are in the last call. Again, it's always tricky how we show this success rate. This takes into account the host institution country and the PIs funded. You see here Croatia with 1 and the 50% success rate, but it's only one, it's two applicants were coming from that country. So now I'm going into the 2024 call calendar. And this is the calendar that you are finding in the ERC Work Programme. So the work program that came out on 10th of July, that's the legal basis for all our functioning. And as I mentioned, this is done and written together with the scientific council who defines this. And of course, operationally, we in the agency, we try to define this date so that it's workable, because it's really like a big machinery of how we organize these panel meetings. Margot already mentioned that for Synergy grants, the deadline is 8 November. You see that starting grant came out 1 day earlier, so on 11th, and it will close on 24 October. And then the consolidator grant will open in September. Then the advanced grants will open only in May next year. And I will speak a bit about the changes there too. And then the proof of concept grants, now this time it has only 2 cutoff dates instead of 3 compared to previous years. You can see already the budgets here, and I will explain what it means. So if you plan to apply to an individual call for starting or consolidator calls, as I mentioned, the eligibility is tied to your PhD date. It was like this, as you see it on this slide, in the 2023 calls, that the eligibility window is measured as the 1st of January of the year of the call. So that always take into consideration. And of course, you have to check the resubmission restrictions that are in the work program. They are in the information for applicants to the respective call too. It's also important to note the time commitment that you have to commit in each of the grant types. In each of those, a PI has to work half of their working time in an EU member state or associated country, with the exception of Synergy grants, because they're one PI can be hosted outside of the EU. Regards the eligibility reference date, that's quite a big change last year, and it meant really a lot of administrative follow-up from our side. It's because now the eligibility date, it is the certified date of the defense, not the date that is on your diploma. So that differs in every country on what dates there are, but we need a document that certifies this defense date. And of course, you are able then to have extensions to these eligibility windows. You can see the reasons here. Again, these are in the information for applicants. You will have these slides. It's in the work program too. So make sure that if you are towards the end of your window or even outside, then you can use these extensions to apply. Now, the structure of the panels, which is relevant to the individual calls. As you know, in the individual calls, one applies to a particular panel. This is not the case in the Synergy grants. But there, now it has been revised, and we have, I will show you what are the changes. What just here to note is that, yes, you choose a panel, but in case your proposal is more relevant to another panel, or there are much closer panel members in expertise in another panel member, we are able to move your proposal, because we are meant to give you the best evaluation. So that's the purpose. So you are indicating which you would like, but we are trying to really match the best, what is the best for your proposal. So if we can, we keep your panel, but if it's needed to move it, then we can move it to another panel. And in case it's really interdisciplinary, so it falls between panels, do mention and flag why you need a secondary panel. This is, again, not the case in the Synergy grants, because one does not apply there to a particular panel. So what are the changes? You can see that the contours of some panels has been redefined. like the cell biology, the LS3 panel, the life science 3 panel. And then you have a change in the social sciences and humanities because there is a completely new panel now, panel 8, SH8, studies and cultures and arts. And then keywords have been moved around and have been redefined for SH3, the social word and its interactions, and SH5, it now has texts and concepts in it. Again, all this in detail and exactly what type of keywords are included in all these panels are mentioned in the information for applicants. Why I'm pointing out, nevertheless, even for Synergy grants, it's because it's true that you are not selecting panels, but when you are applying, you are required to select up to 6 keywords, minimum 4, but maximum 6 keywords that are tied to this system of evaluation. And the reason for that is that helps us in a way, especially in step 1, where there is only one evaluation panel, to assign better the proposals based on your abstract and based on the keywords that you provided. So choose them, look at them carefully, choose them carefully, and define carefully the free keywords as well. Now, I'm going into the changes in the work program. I have 3 slides on this. Quite many changes. So really this time the Scientific Council has shaken up a bit the ERC to match how the research, especially the principal investigators' track record is assessed. So now they go into a much broader assessment of the principal investigator, not a prescriptive, but more a descriptive. So you can list up to 10 research outputs. There is no separate starting, consolidator, advanced grants, whatever profiles. There's only one type of profile that one can have in any type of grants. So you have to list these ones as well as prizes, all your research achievement, recent achievements. And of course, you are able then to describe with a short narrative description the significance of all these outputs. What was your role in it? You can also demonstrate, if you want, your capacity to successfully carry out the proposed project, if you had previous grants or any other thing. Also, in case you had a career break or a very unconventional, going from industry back, or you completely changed your path, you are able then to explain this one. And also you are able to describe any contribution to the research community. So let me just show you I hope you can see this. So when you start applying on the funding and tenders portal, then you have a series of, you have a description of the call, and then you have a series of documents. There is the information for applicants, the work program, but also the administrative forms as a template just to see. And when you log into the actual submission system, then you can see, of course, everything. That you can download the templates themselves. But just to show you what it means. So as I said, this can be downloaded from the funding and tenders portal. And if I go into the part B1, this is the administrative form, just an example on how it looks like. And then one goes into the part B1. So that's the part B1 for Synergy. It's very similar, by the way, for the other calls as well. I mean, the front page. Then, of course, what you are describing in those 5 pages. And then comes the curriculum vitae and track record. That is now 4 pages for each principal investigator. What changed is that we have extremely few personal details, just education and qualifications and current positions. And that's, again, just to be able to compare, to have some sort of benchmarking, especially in the starting and consolidator when one needs to, for example, check the PhD dates. And then you have the section on research achievements and peer recognition. And what I just mentioned in my slide, you know, these 10 research outputs and how you describe it, it's exactly described in this template. So I hope it will be quite clear for you when you are reading it of what you have to include. It's self-explanatory. We didn't add more things about it in the information for applicants. It has to stand alone. You have to understand what needs in here. And if not, then feel free to write to us and to ask, because it's new for all of us. So we are trying to to make the best of it and to guide you as much as we can. So you can see here the peer recognition part too, and then you can have this additional information on the career breaks or contributions to the research community, and it describes the template of what you need to put in. So this is available for every call in the submission system on the funding and tenders portal. Now going back to my slides, one other important modification is explicitly mentioning that the proposal matters more than the applicant. This is not quantified. It doesn't say that you have to have 70% and 30% or whatever. No, it's not possible really to quantify. There was a long debate on it. But what it says, in fact, it puts into paper on how already the panels were working. Not all of them, but many of the panels in every call, they already were weighting the proposal more than the PI part. Now it's explicitly said that it matters more, and that is left to somehow the judgment of the panel on how it is more. But of course, now, as you can see, the whole CV and track record part also changed significantly. What didn't change at all is how actually the proposal is put together, the technical part. What has changed, again, it's the evaluation questions alongside with all this. One question has been taken out. This is the question whether, to what extent the proposal is of high risk and high gain. And also, there's a second one, whether it needs a development of the novel methodology. This does not mean that what we are looking for in the ERC changed, not at all, but it was felt that it was really misunderstood by the panels and how this high risk, high gain, or even the novel methodology is looked at. What matters is that the proposal has to be very ambitious now, and it's the same in a way, whether it's high risk, high gain, how ambitious your proposed research is. I think that the questions are a bit rephrased and they are now targeting this aspect. Now, the other thing, let me go to the next slide, this one. So the evaluation process per se will be done exactly in the same manner, peer review panels, just based on the scientific excellence. What changed again in the individual calls only, in Synergy not, and I will go in detail what is going on in Synergy, but the starting consolidated advanced grants is a two-step process. And you have now these 44 proposals that can be passed to step 2. This is a capping of the call. And in fact, it affects very few panels. And it was done. And this is how, in fact, again, the panels operated before. It does not mean that the success rate overall changed. It does not, because when the proposals come in, as I said, they're your target panels. And in the panels, you calculate the panel budgets based on the proposals, the budgets of the proposals that apply to that panel. And therefore, the overall success rate remains the same. However, what changes, and which can change, is the step 1 success rate. So indeed, in the very, very big panels, it may happen that the success rate from passing to step 1 to step 2 is lower than in some other panels. For example, we see that in the life science panel in the past years, we are receiving fewer and fewer proposals. Now there they have a chance a bit to pass a bit more proposals in step 2. So it could be beneficial also for the competition that is there in step 2. And for the very big ones, they couldn't really pass a lot more already in the past years. In fact, there were some years when they passed about 50 proposals and the panels had to split to evaluate those proposals, because otherwise it's not possible to do them in those 5 days. So that globally, the success rate, it's not changed. It just makes the operation smoother. And I hope that it will benefit you as applicants. And there is no point in playing the games whether you should apply to this or the other panel again, because the proposal hopefully will be evaluated in the best suited panel. What was changed though, it's again of making sure that applicants can resubmit if their proposals was quite good already at step 1, but they are not able to pass them because of this capping to the step 2, then there is the scoring of A, not invited. So not invited to pass to step 2 evaluation. This is introduced in all the 3 calls. It does not have any effect on the resubmission rules in the synergy grants, because there we have very different resubmission restrictions. It doesn't really matter whether you get an A or B. Only the C score matters for the synergy grants, but other than that, you're able to apply regardless of your score to any type of individual grant. But in case of the starting, consolidator, and advanced grant, it makes a huge difference, because there will be, and there were many applicants already that the panel felt extremely sorry for them to not being able to pass them to step 2, but they were subject to the disease resubmission rules the next year. So this will no longer be the case. If they get an A not invited, then they will be able to submit the following year. The other main change is that on a pilot basis, we are introducing the lump sums in the advanced grants, only in the advanced grants, which means that at granting, it's a defined fixed amount. There is no financial reporting whatsoever during the grant time. Now, again, there are lump sums, and how in other parts of the commission is done, this is quite different from us. We again try to keep it very simple, still focused on this frontier research that we are funding, with providing the autonomy for the principal investigator, the portability, and all the rest. You have a series of very good questions and answers on our website. So in case you plan to apply to an advanced grant, then make sure that you are reading this, because this will be a novelty even for the host institutions, for the administrations too, on how to define these costs, although they are not significantly different, but they they have to make sure that the eligibility of the costs are already correct when they are putting it in the application. So this was mainly the changes for the work program, and now I'm going into the design of the Synergy Grant Call. And here you can see that we will have money for about 40 grants to be funded. Just as a comparison, now we are running the Synergy 2023 grants. We just finished the step 1. We are now going into the interview stage, where we invited yesterday the applicants for the interview stage. And this year we have 300 million euros. And we have some extra money for a reserve list budget. We do not yet know whether we will have any extra for next year or not. We'll see. But basically, it's a much bigger budget in 24 than we had in 23, 400 millions. And I mentioned it's 10 million euros, and with additional 4 million euros. If you have questions on that, I can answer of what they are. It's very clearly described in the templates, of course, of part B2 when you are describing your budget section. What is important is that in general, as in other ERC grants, the host institution to which the PI is linked has to be in Europe, or an associated country. But of course, here, one of the PIs can apply with a host institution outside. And to this PI, it does not apply that they have to spend time in Europe, but of course, they have to spend minimum 30% of their time on the project. 2, 3, 4 principal investigators, it's equally good if they are on the same corridor, same institution, or they are in very distant countries. It doesn't matter. What matters is how they will work together and what the idea is. So there is no plus or minus if you are knowing each other very well, or if you're working in the same location or not. Yes. Now, what is important at the core, you should have, as I mentioned, and it was true already for the past years, a very ambitious research problem. This research problem, I received also a question whether, what does it mean to be transformative on a global scale? Basically, what we have seen in the projects that we are funding is that they're really capable of shaking up research, not just in Europe, but they're really advancing globally research. So if you can have a research problem that is that ambitious, that of course it's an addition. There's no formal evaluation question on that. It just has to be a very ambitious question that cannot be addressed without a group. So if it doesn't shine through that it's not a joint effort of the PIs, it will not fly. So if the evaluators will look that it could be done by individual PIs working alone, then that's not for the synergy grants. You have to be complementary, this know-how of the group, the combination of the approaches, the combination of the background of the PIs has to prove that it's only in this unique combination you can go for this solving this research problem. And the PIs here, as I mentioned, you don't have to choose any career stage. It's equally welcome if you are in a young career stage or an older one. So just make sure that you're using the template, the new template for your CV and track record. The PIs are equal. In the submission system, the corresponding institution is called a coordinating institution. It's not really the purpose in these grants. It's just that it's a common submission system for every grant type funded in the Horizon Europe, in the European Commission. But basically, it's important that there is a designated corresponding PI, which is mainly an administrative burden. It's administrative contact. So the money, the reporting, everything flows through this PI to the other PIs. But other than that, the PIs are equal. They are named in the grant. Each of them has the right to move their grants to another institution if they don't like it where they are. And it's also expected that the PIs remain part of the group for the whole grant. So if one PI dies, we had this case, or a PI wants to go out of the project for whatever reason, it may be reevaluated. So the agency will assess whether the grant can continue or not, because it's like an individual PI grant. If a PI is no longer there, it's not the same. It's not replaceable by another part. So that's why it's not a loose coordinated project. So here again, the synergy aspects of the project, they are a means to achieve the ambitious research, because again, you have to prove that these teams can combine very well their expertise to be the PIs holding the central role. What is not synergy, it's not a loose cooperation or networking or just passing the information from one group to the other. So that it's really, it will never fly. So if the evaluators, I think, will see if it's a recycled proposal that you submitted to somewhere else, and it just shows that you have many collaborators and you want to do a project. It has to be a very, very tight-knit, a very compact, a good idea. And I'm emphasizing that it does not have to cover very distant disciplines or fields. It does not have to be interdisciplinary necessarily. What matters here, it can be a project which has, for example, quantum computing, and it has theoretical or experimental parts in it. So you can combine those aspects too. Again, what matters is how complementary these PIs are. Now, how the proposal is structured. You have the administrative forms. It's not very complicated to fill it in, but don't even think of doing it the last day. So I really advise you that you as a PI, if you started, or as a host institution administrative person, if you started, then get familiar with it, put in the data correctly, fill out all the annexes. So you have to have a commitment letter from each of the host institutions employing the PIs. If all 4 PIs come from a single institution, 1 letter will suffice, and then you will have to name the PIs in these letters. You submit the ethics documents, those ones that you have. In case the proposal is selected for funding, then it goes through an ethics evaluation. And then this is the administrative part. It's not very difficult. Then you have the part B1 and B2. The part B1 is a 5-page document. And I showed you the curriculum vitae and track record part. The rest, it's 5 pages. plus the references. Part B2, it's 15 pages. That's where you have the budget breakdown per PIs. And again, the references and the further annexes do not count in these two. So what changed, for example, is that in part B1, we had a comment on the funding IDs, so which are the grants that you submitted or you have connected to these grants, and now that is moved at the end of part B2. Here in part B1, I left their comment text box on cross-domain nature explanation. That is really not for the synergy grant, that is more for the individual grants. Because as I said there, if it requires 2 panels, then it's easier to select even reviewers from different panels or to move a proposal to another panel. Submission restrictions, basically, only if you get a C score, then you will not be able to apply to the following synergy grant application, but you are able to apply to any other call. These are always going back to the restrictions, they look back, so I cannot say what will be the restriction exactly in the 25 call, but presumably it will be very similar to what is there in the 24 grants. Now, to be eligible for the 24 synergy grants, note that if you already have a running ERC grant, that has to have an end date before 8 November 2025, so 2 years from the call deadline. What is evaluated? The research project principal investigators with more emphasis on the research project. Note that in 5 pages, the detailed methodology is not assessed, just the feasibility of the grant and the budget either. Neither the team, just the PIs. So the team does not necessarily need to be described at the amount that you do it in part B2. How the evaluation process goes on. That is quite an interesting one and always challenging both for reviewers and for us. It's a 3-step process where all applicants apply to a single panel. What is really very important to note that the panel members, there are 87 dedicated panel members in the Synergy Grant Call, they really act as generalists. Therefore, very much take care on how well you are writing the B1 part so that you are writing it to those panel members who are not very close to your field. And because these 87 panel members are not fully able to cover all fields of science and scholarship, they are helped out by so-called panel evaluators. These are panel members of other ERC calls, previous synergy years, starting COG, advanced grant calls. And we use every year about 130, 140 on top of the 87 panel members in step 1, again, to help these proposals, because every proposal receives minimum 4 reviews, 4, 5, 6 reviews in step 1. And these panel members, contrary to how the starting consolidated advanced grants goes, they do not come to Brussels to meet at step 1. It's only the chairs and vice chairs. So 11 people come to Brussels, and only based on the written reviews, they have to decide how many proposals can be passed to the next step. And the margin is quite generous because we can pass about 7 times the called budget, 7 times the 400 million, and you can count about 10 million on average per grant size. And then once the proposals are identified for step 2, then together with the chairs, we are defining 5 panels that are different every year. And of course, the panel members are different every year as well. Roughly, 2 of these panels are life science oriented, 2 physical sciences and engineering, 1 social science and humanities oriented. But they are very interdisciplinary. So if a proposal needs a panel member from another panel, then they surely will pop in at the discussion and at the interview, and they will discuss the proposals jointly. So again, it doesn't really matter in which panels a proposal ends up. We just try to match at the best possible way the pool of proposals that are still in the game with the expertise of the panel members that we have, is 87. Now, of course, because this now the part B1 and B2 are evaluated, the panel members still act as generalists. It can happen that some panel members are very close to your proposal, to your topic, but they make sure that they are using a lot of specialists. These are the so-called remote referees. These are external reviewers. They are not paid. They review generally 1, maximum 2 proposals. So in the end, every proposal in step 2 ends up with about 8, 10, 12 reviews. And then based on these reviews, when we all have them, which were all separately individually written, then the panel members meet in Brussels, and then they decide which are the proposals that can be called for an interview. And similarly to this year, about 4 times the panel budget could be invited for the interview. So step 3 comes exactly as we are now. There are no new questions or no new reviews written at all. So they are basing their decision on how the PIs perform at the interview. So the interview matters enormously, and based on the step 2 reviews. And then they interview each applicant for about 45 minutes in the room. Then the panel discusses the applicants, they compare it with the other proposals in the panel. And then they score, and basically they rank this proposal and they decide which ones can be funded. Who are the reviewers? Just for you to know that roughly, again, as I said, this is the 22 call. I cannot discuss what is exactly in the 23 core. You could see that there we have 86 panel members, and roughly the percentage in each scientific domain as well. And you can see how many people, how many panel evaluators, for which we are very grateful, helped out in step 1. And in step 2, it's an enormous exercise, the specialist remote referees, because we are invited, for example, last year, well above 4,000, to have about 1,300 reviews submitted. But that's normal. Only about 1/3 of the reviewers deliver actual review. That's normal in every call. And we have to chase them. And it's very heavy, both on the panel members and on the ERC staff as well, to get the right reviewers, the right numbers, so that the proposal is evaluated from all aspects, so that the panel can benefit when they are discussing jointly all these proposals. Now, just in the last part of my presentation, hints and tips on preparing an application. I'm emphasizing several times that it's really the panel members act as generalists, so make the part B1 accessible to non-specialists, to look at the evaluation questions very much and try to address them in your part B1 and B2. So look what exactly the reviewers have to answer. You find these questions in the work program, in the information for applicants. The forms are the same, by the way, almost to all grants. The Synergy has some additional questions on the synergetic aspects of the proposals. So this know-how of the group, how these are combined, is very important. Know your competitors, describe what is the state of play and why is your idea so much better than it, why it's a significant leap, and it's not an incremental research. And then in part B2, remember that in step 2 and step 3, and especially in step 2, both part B1 and B2 are looked at together. So it does not look good if you are just repeating part B1 in part B2. Really, the panel members are not really happy if they see that in part B1, you have the 5 pages, concise presentation of your project, you have the CV and track record. In part B2, you have these 15 pages where you are describing the methodology, the budget, and how you will actually do it and how the team is composed. So details are important. Justify, know your requested resources. When you come to the interview, they will ask about any doubts on the resources. Unfortunately, in the Synergy grant, it is not possible to have a detailed structured budget in the administrative form that automatically calculates the the amounts, they add it together. You have to put it in part B2. And we are noticing a lot of errors when applicants put together these budgets. For small errors, we leave it as it is. We cut it, or that's you have to live with the errors. If it's a big error, 50, 100,000, millions, then we go back to the applicants and we try to clarify it. It's a lot of additional work, and it does not look good for the reviewers, again, if you are not capable of putting together numbers. And especially the interviews, if they ask you in terms of resources, and I don't mean why exactly that amount is there, but why did you ask for 5 PhDs, or why 3 postdocs, why that particular equipment? You should know it, because it's a very big amount of money that you are requesting, so that the reviewers want to be sure that it's right for your project. So they don't cut it unnecessarily. There were very few cuts, by the way, in the Synergy grants. If you have additional team members, so 2, 3, or 4 PIs, but all these can have additional team members that are either in their institution or in very different institutions. It's fine. We have projects with several additional participants as team members, because you have certain parts of the projects that you can outsource. You don't need such an advancement in that field. So describe that part also in part B2. So as a summing up, the idea, it's extremely important then how you are designing it with this tight-knit group. So what we have seen is that if you just have a PI and you try to fit a proposal to it because you have some nice friends that you know that you can work it, might not always be that good idea. It's usually that the idea is there, something that you can never do alone, and then you try to find really the best people that can complement you, and without them you cannot do your project. Have this letter of support in time from your host institution. Check the resubmission restrictions, write very carefully the part B1, choose those keywords carefully, and the abstract as well, because it will make our life and the panel chair's life more easy when we are assigning the proposal in step 1. Know the evaluation criteria so that the reviewers can find all those answers in your part B1 and part B2. What we have noticed that many successful applicants, they got feedback from their peers, from their colleagues, or even further distant colleagues. When the interview, they prepared a lot. They had mock interviews. Those questions were of absolute need and good when they came to Brussels. And what we also have noticed that for very challenging proposals, this obstacle of different scientific languages was quite important. What I mean here is that, for example, you have the word catalyst. It's not the same in biology or as in chemistry. So you think it's the same, but when these people actually in this very challenging project started to work together because of the way these communities work differently, it meant different things. So until you get all the scientific language consistent in a project from all different aspects, it's quite important to do well. And please submit your proposal before the deadline. Competitive call, not a loose consortium. And even if you're an early career applicant, you're absolutely encouraged to apply. Here, this slide is only to show you that we have many re-applicants. So people who applied, who have previous grants, who applied to individual grants, but also who applied previously to the Synergy grants. And what we are seeing that it's a learning process. So don't get discouraged if you apply the first time and you do not succeed. Please think of resubmitting, because what we are seeing is that you have twice as more chances at least to get the grant the second or third time. It's a very competitive call. And that's it, basically. It's just this further advice. You will find links when you get my presentation. You have classes, you really have information videos on Synergy grants, grantees made from real Synergy grants. Look at the funded projects and then read all these guidance documents. And after you've read your guidance documents and you have issues with them, then come to us. We are very happy to help you. And that's it, basically. I'm there for you if you have any questions. I'm stop sharing it. Yes. So if you have any question, that's the good time to ask it.
Thank you very much, Agnes. Yes, we have indeed received some questions beforehand that we have delivered to you, and
yes,
we think the majority of them were answered, but some still remain unanswered. So Mireia will take over and handle those, and
yes.
also the questions that were raised now during the webinar.
Sure. Tell me which one I did not answer or anything new.
Yes, hello. Just I think we can start with the questions from participants that they have just submitted. So there are two questions regarding panel members and panel members lists. So the first one is, has the step 1 panel in 2023 more or less the same members as the panel in 2022?
Absolutely not. So first of all, it's true that in general, every second year a panel repeats in ERC calls. Even that is not fully true because half of those panels are new in every call. Now in Synergy Grants, we did not have a call in the 2021 year. You know, the whole New Horizon program was compressed. We couldn't fit in at all the Synergy Grants at that time. Therefore, also to allow panel members of previous calls or whatever, there were several reasons, but basically the 22 and 23 panels are extremely different. So they're completely new, almost from scratch. And even the 24 evaluation panel, it's more than 50%. I think more than 65% of the panel members are changed. So don't read into who actually looked at it 2 years ago. If you have submitted, there is no value in that. You can just see maybe what type of people are there, what fields are covering. That is important to know. And of course, it will depend a lot, again, what other panel members, what is their expertise, what exactly is your proposal to assign them this year.
Okay. Thank you. So the same participant is asking, so completing this question and asking if the composition of the Synergy 3C panel for the 2023 call is the same as
No, not at all.
The one before.
Absolutely not. Even if the panel members would be the same, we wouldn't have the same panel. But as I said, way more than half are not the same. And it's because when we start the step 2, then there's a day when we meet with the panel chairs. We look very closely what are the proposals there in question. And we look at the expertise of the panel members. And that's how we form the 5 panels. So we really try to best match of what fits better, what type of proposal fits better in one panel or the other one. And even the panel members, they are completely changed. If one was in C, it can even be in a life science panel next year, depending on their background. So it's not relevant at all.
Perfect. Thank you very much. There's another question regarding the evaluation. So yes, so in step 2 and in step 3, if reviewers know if a proposal is indeed a resubmission and if they have any information on the previous evaluation.
No, unless of course the applicant mentions it in their own proposal. Sometimes we see that they mention it. But know that in all ERC grants, we never inform any panel about previous resubmissions. They shouldn't, because this is a new call, a new competition, new set of proposals. Your proposal is evaluated on its own in that competition. They don't have access reviewers to previous reviews either. So we see that some applicants, they mention that it's a resubmission or that they corrected this and that. It can play in their favor or not. There is no good or bad thing in this. But again, they have absolutely no knowledge which one is a resubmission. And even if there could be a reviewer that remembers, then we tell them, we right away tell them, forget about this. This doesn't enter into the discussion. Yeah.
Perfect, extremely clear. And so we got a question regarding additional participants in an ERC, and here, so specifically regarding the Synergy grant. So could you please elaborate further on participation of additional participants apart from the 2 for PIs? So could these participants be PIs within the host organization?
Yes, so yes, they can be from the same organization. In that case, what is different is than the administrative form, you do not need to include additional participants, additional beneficiaries, because if your team member is from your host institution, you are describing it basically in part B2. You are describing there the composition of the team and which additional teams in your institution you would employ, and you include their budgets under a particular PI's budget. These additional beneficiaries enter more in the game also when they are from a very distant institution. That's when you have to actually include them in the submission forms as a separate legal entity, as additional beneficiaries. But again, team members are not necessarily core part of the project. So a project could live without team members in the sense that they do not, so the PIs have to add together something really more than what is individually. So they all, as I said, they have a very important role. Team members, they carry out lesser parts. They're replaceable. It's a part of the project that you could give to even another team, another competency if you need it. I hope I explained it clearly.
To me, it was really clear. If not, we will have a comment or another question from the person who asked it. And please remember that you can also raise your hand, and we'll try to give you the floor if any clarification is needed. And so yes, here I can see a question regarding the interactions that PIs could have had before, if this is important for a Synergy grant application.
It's a good question, and it's often discussed also by the panels. It's neither good, neither bad. So we have seen many grants in which they have never collaborated before, and we have seen where they have significantly collaborated before, or subparts of the group collaborated 2 and 2, but never together. Whatever is good. What is important though, that your project, it's not an obvious continuation of your current work if you have worked together. So if you have a well-working team and you have done that in the past 5-10 years and you just want to continue just a bit, a stepwise change, that is not good enough. So you have to prove that even with this team, it's something that you can never really in this joint administrative group, you can do it now together.
Okay, thank you. So a question now related to the success rate of the Synergy grant. So you already explained about the success rate of this instrument of the ERC, but what about if the comparison between the other, so specifically with consolidator grants in here, but I think this is just an example.
Yes, I can comment on that. So again, success rate, we don't know what will be in the future. We never know how many proposals, but if you look at the past years, starting consolidator, advanced grants, they all have a success rate now of close to 15%. We have a success rate of 8, 9, if you have a bit of more budget allocated, much lower success rate, but it's still a good success rate. So yes, in an individual grant, you have a bit more chances, but that's not the right thinking again for Synergy. Here, the thinking is, can I do it alone? Then I should apply to the starting grants or any individual grant. If I know a way that I can do this alone, then I have to apply to the Synergy grants.
Okay, thank you. And we just got a question regarding the participation of UK PIs. This was a question that already Marjo and I got. We usually get this kind of question. So indeed, what would happen if the UK is still not associated to Horizon Europe, and so how to deal with
Okay.
potential participation of a PI in a synergy group.
Yes. So what we for sure we know for the moment is that for the 23 and 24 grants, UK can participate as any other associated country or any EU country in evaluation. However, if they do not ratify by the time of the grant signature, which means for Synergy Grants 24, it will be sometime in winter, late fall next year, 24 next year. They do not ratify this association to the UK, then that PI cannot be funded from the ERC Synergy Grants. Sorry, walk backwards. In the ERC, one PI can apply with a country that is outside. So if you have only one UK PI, no issue. Doesn't matter whether the UK is in or out in association agreement, because you can always do that. However, if you have 2 or 3 or 4 UK participants, or if you have US plus UK participant, then the UK participant needs to either change institution, or what happened this year too in the 2022 grants is that the UK RI took over their parts of the grant. So we decreased the grant amount, the project remains the same, but the UK participant has to get the money from the UK. And there is a third option too, that the proposal, so the UK participant cannot have the money from UKRI. We don't know whether the UKRI will want to fund or not. We have no idea about that. The PI does not want to move, and in that case, the project is reevaluated with the rest of the remaining PIs to see whether it's still feasible to do it with one less PI. There, I'm not sure. Yeah, so there are different solutions, but basically, don't worry too much about it. We always found a solution, and what we see is that they are okay for evaluation. So that's a long process. We'll see what will happen.
Okay, so this is the message. Thank you. Another question we got before, so not during the webinar, but indeed is still regarding the group, the synergy group composition, right?
Yeah.
And so it is, can there be co-funded PIs under one of the main PIs to divide certain tasks that require additional expertise?
I'm not sure I understand the co-funding. That's for the UK. Is it a UK related question?
No,
because,
nothing to do with the UK. So yeah, I understand that we are still in the context of having additional participants in a synergy grant.
The reason why I don't fully understand, so it is possible, just to go up to, it is possible that you have PIs, and not all PIs require money. So if it's a PI, you can still be part of the group. Your CV and track record can be evaluated. You as a whole project contribute, but you can describe in the funding that in fact you have the funds, you just want to collaborate. So that for sure you can assure the co-funding, and you're not requiring funds for that. So that could be one way. Additional participants too. There are certain cases when they are not requiring any funding, but then I wonder, why do you legally want to necessarily involve them in the project if you don't require any funding? So again, I'm not fully sure I understand your question. If you have something like that, write to us, write to the Synergy applicant mailbox. We can send it also to the financial colleagues for further insights.
Okay, I completely understand. And I see that we have other 3 questions for which I think it would be not easy to answer, because these are really specific questions related to a particular proposal, but we'll try to address as many questions as we can. So the one I have here is, I applied in 2020 for a synergy grant. And the main argument against the proposal by the panel was that the two subdisciplines of linguistics were not distinct enough, which is simply not true. But that was still the main argument against the proposal. If I understand you correctly, this has now changed. So if we apply again, this will not be used against us, right?
So if you apply again, nothing will be used against you. As I said, you are competing on your own, so no one will know what is there. You have a very different set of reviewers too, completely. However, the judgment that something is not distinct enough, that's a scientific judgment. I cannot comment on that. Maybe the new panel again will consider it. This is similarly, as I mentioned, the complementarity of the PIs is essential. So if they felt that the PIs or the subjects that you are tackling, they are too close to each other, then they question, why is this not more an individual grant? Why do you need two people with very similar expertise or with ideas that are extremely similar? So that didn't change really. So I don't know, again, in your particular case, what other arguments were there also. But the fact that you consider it not true or true, that's a scientific judgment that we can never, I cannot comment, and I don't have an idea how they will look at it next time, a new set of reviewers. But again, the whole project has to be very complementarity and challenging to address, to be sure that that several PIs are needed for that.
Okay, thank you very much. We have also a question regarding eligibility, and I think that this should be addressed by contacting the NCPs. I don't know if you, Agnes, would like to
add.
I'm
seeing the question now. So if you do not have an award, I mean a defense date on it, and you apply to the starting or consolidator, it could be a problem. So I do advise that you are really sending an email to the call that you want to apply to. There is you can find again on our website the addresses, and it's my presentation as well. Ask them this specific question, even send your diploma and ask them what they think then you should obtain or ask, because you have to have some sort of document, even if they cannot issue you a defense date. For example, on my diploma either, you don't have that one, but surely an administration should be able to deliver some document at request, because if you don't have it, you will be declared ineligible. So there's time, submit your request to us, and then probably my colleagues will deal with it, and those eligibilities will be able to reply.
Yes, I can add that it's the second year in which we are dealing with such kind of questions, and for sure the suggestion, our recommendation is to get prepared on time, because of course you are and so ask. And so yes, two questions regarding the budget in these synergy grants. So the first one, to perform the project, we need to subcontract the fabrication of electronic circuits by the foundry, whatever. And so the cost of this is 2,050 kilo euros. And we need at least to produce 3 of these. So can it be foreseen in the additional costs?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that, because you are mentioning that this is subcontracting. So subcontracting goes into a different budget line. And is it development of major equipment? So is it use of major equipment? That's a good question. It depends again how you are presenting it. So I'm not sure mentioning subcontracting there, it's the right thing to do. So, but I think it might go. Anyway, if you have again doubts here, write to us. I can send it to my financial colleagues, and then they can a bit help with that one. It's a bit tricky on really how to put it, because it's really a fabrication, so of electronic circuits. Yeah, but I think it could be included. Yeah.
And so the last question I can see in here regarding the use of supercompute resources. And so if this could be
Yes,
included.
it could.